Right.
Just, this is okay.
Right.
And this is okay. And
because I encourage them. I'm like, I would research where that actually says you can't talk to your kids.
Today, Brandy and I are going to be talking about the information control that comes along with Jehovah's Witness organization. She is going to be sharing some stories with us about her own experience. But overall, the Jehovah's Witness organization controls information by their publications, by who they're allowed to talk to within and without the organization, and just in many, many ways. So Brandy's going to start off by sharing how she started conducting her own independent research.
Yes, that was a big one. That was my first real big hurdle of leaving the Jehovah's Witness organization, was actually finally making the decision to look at outside information or publications or anything, YouTube videos. I remember that's a big deal. I think it's a big deal for any witness that is leaving or wanting to research or, wanting to even prove it to themselves. To do any kind of going beyond any of the Jehovah's Witness organization material, because they tell you can't. So that you're only allowed to do any research. You're not allowed to research Jehovah's Witnesses on the internet, or even read news articles that would contain negative information or what they would consider, putting the witnesses in a negative light.
And so as a member of the organization, they don't want you to read negative material that's been published about the Jehovah's Witness organization. But in terms of, I think you said there's you can read positive information.
Yeah, so they would even use positive information, and they would any news articles that can be a positive or make the witnesses look in a positive light, from talking about convention and how organized and happy everyone looks, and how well the witnesses would usually clean the convention center. That would get published as well. And so those were all obviously highlighted and were fine to read about and to know about. But you would have any news outlet that would put out maybe a questionable article or highlighting child abuse or anything that would make the witnesses look negative. Is you're told not to read it, not to watch it,
and not to believe it.
And not to believe it because it's false. There's lies. So they tell you cannot, that it's all bad. It is a Satan's attack on his people.
Right. If it's negative information.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Only just negative.
Right. Only negative. So that was, that's a really big deal, I think, for witnesses to go outside the witness literature. And I know it was for me. I know I was scared about getting in trouble, but then I was like, I think I just said this to you. I said, but I was going to be the only person that's going to know that I've done it.
Right.
And yet that governs me enough, because I would feel bad, and that's wrong. And
right.
And
because there's an established thought pattern that you shouldn't engage in independent research or independent thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
And with independent thinking, I remember I was actually at an assembly, and I think a lot of the talks were having to talk about like independent thinking. And I remember sitting there listening to that and thinking, I don't understand. I don't understand, because what's wrong with me thinking for myself? And I remember, now I can look back and say that was a red flag for me, looking back. At that moment in time, it raised my eyebrow because I couldn't understand why I couldn't think for myself.
Yeah.
Why that was wrong, why that was negative.
Right.
But I didn't do anything about it.
And like follow up on it.
No, I didn't go research anything. I didn't, other than questioning that information being given to me.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I didn't go and do anything. I didn't go look anything up. I couldn't understand why independent thinking for myself, or why thinking for myself, was so bad.
Yeah. So that thought that you had, was that a regular occurrence, this thought of, why can't I think for myself? Like, did that recur over and over again, or was it just a blip, just happened every so often?
I think for me, sometimes it was blips that happened ever so often. I would hear things, or they would come out with new light, and that is meaning that they have a new understanding of a policy, and maybe they'll, to back it up scripturally, and or a doctrine has adjusted because now they have a new understanding of the scriptures, that this is now why we're changing this belief.
Okay.
And so, looking back on it, I can see how that can be how that information control and how keeping you inside, like just researching, within the literature, yes, it keeps you contained and having the same thought process. But if you look at it, and when the governing body are able to make these adjustments because they have a new understanding of a scripture, but as a publisher or rank and file witness, or really any witness, elder, ministerial servant, any of them, you can't question any doctrine or any policies, or you can't question anything that you're being told, because then you run the risk of being labeled an apostate or bad association, or and then you could get privileges taken away from you by even asking these questions, or talking to even your mate. If you're having thoughts, by talking to your mate would be the one to have to tell on you.
Yeah. So there's this hierarchical structure of who has information and who has the power to make changes to the doctrine.
Right.
And if you're lower in the level, then you are expected to just accept what the elders or those that are higher up. And I don't know all the terms, but
no, you're fine. So the governing body is the only ones that will change the doctrine.
Okay.
And they're the highest up. You don't get any higher than that within the organizational chart.
Yeah.
Then you have circuit overseers, that they have special information.
Okay. What is special information?
I mean, new rules or policies that are going to be taking place, that are going to be changing within the congregation.
Okay.
Usually they kind of get handed down and spread out that way, or the elders receive this information in a congregation through letters from the watchtower of changing things.
Okay.
And so then elders can't tell anyone until they have to announce it to everyone at the, whenever they're told to announce it.
Yeah.
Then elders then also get a special book once they become elders, that have basically all the rules and policies and discipline, if you were to break any of them, that no one else is allowed to see.
Okay. Right. So there's this element of mystery.
Yes.
That keeps the congregation, keeps the members, rank and file, guessing. And it's almost like it's this, like, what's behind that closed door.
Right.
And only those with privilege will get to that.
Yeah, and yes, they're the only ones that can receive that information. And then, you have pioneers that men or women can be pioneers, and they go to a special pioneer school. And so that's only for pioneers.
Mm-hmm. And is there special information at the pioneer
It's
school?
just, you get a special book as well.
Okay.
And it's not as a taboo book that no one ever gets to see it.
Okay.
It's just, but it's a special book that they get for
Mhm.
completing Pioneer School. It's a book about diving deeper really into the Bible, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's another publication that they
Yeah.
use.
What was it like for you, because you were a publisher,
Mm-hmm.
what was it like for you knowing that there's this, like, the hierarchical structure, and knowing that they have this special power to like adjust the doctrine? Like, do you remember having thoughts about that? Like, were you curious about what goes on?
Oh yeah, I was super curious. I remember actually asking a question. It was probably in my early 20s. And I was like, how in the world do they come up with this? And I wasn't asking, I mean, it sounds like I was being like maybe aggressive or just, you know,
having an attitude.
Yeah, but I wasn't. I'm like, but really, how do they come up with it? Like, how do they all of a sudden decide, okay, well, today, now from this point forward,
Yeah.
we are going to believe it this way.
You were curious about the process.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't like understand how now we believed it a certain way for a certain amount of time, and all of a sudden, now we believe it in a different way, or it's tweaked ever so slightly.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, another time where I really questioned like independent thinking was when they were changing a doctrinal, like the generation.
Okay.
And I know you don't know what I'm referring to,
Mhm.
but so much they really kind of almost changed or tweaked even the definition of the word generation. And that's something that I think I noticed that them doing,
Okay.
kind of adjusting definitions
Right. Okay.
to kind of suit their
Yeah.
what they needed, what they were telling. And so, and it was, I could never figure out how they were able to completely change.
Make these shifts.
Huge shifts.
Huge shifts. They weren't little.
Some were little.
Okay.
And then some were really big.
Okay.
And, it's just how they did it, how they went through process of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And, later on it came out that, for me, they meet on Wednesdays and they discuss different things. And that's the amount of information I got. But, and people would think, even though I was really just a rank and file witness, publisher, people would always think I had special information.
Oh.
Because I had an uncle that was part of the governing body.
Right, so by association.
Right, which I didn't.
People considered that you were kind of in the know.
Right.
In the circle.
Yes.
Inner circle, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you started, so you had a thought of, why can't I think for myself? Why can't I be an independent thinker? When you started your research, like, what did you look at? What did you think? What was that process like as you were being a little bit sneaky?
So I think the first thing I did, I watched a video that was of another mom. I think I talked about this before, of her leaving. And I think the biggest thing, the impression that it made for me, is that she just was talking about her experience. And it was nothing, mean or negative. It was just her experience and why she chose to research for herself her beliefs. And the way it was just, that was, she's left, so that would be considered apostate material, but there was nothing in there. She wasn't, debating doctrine. It wasn't anything about that. It was just, she did her own research. It didn't add up. One thing led to another. They left.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, this isn't bad and scary, because you're told that these apostates are, bad and that they're this negative, horrible people.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't the case at all.
Yeah.
Just because
Right.
your viewpoints have now changed.
Okay, so you saw this video of
Mhm.
her sharing her experience, and did you relate to her? Did you reject what she was saying? Did you like buy into it? What do you
So
remember?
yeah, I didn't reject what she was saying because it was just stating facts. There was no
Mhm.
it wasn't, aggressive. It wasn't being really even negative about the witnesses.
Yeah,
It
sounds
was
like she was just logically presenting her experience.
right, and
Yeah.
that's what it was. And I was like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
Well, that wasn't at all kind of what I thought
Right.
that would have been.
Mhm.
So that surprised me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So maybe you were expecting um
These negative, horrible rants about
Yes.
Jehovah's Witnesses and how bad of people they are,
Yeah.
and they should not. I was just thinking,
Yeah.
okay, this apostate material, it's just going to be bad.
Garbage.
It's just right.
Yeah.
It's going to be garbage. It's going to be negative. It's
Yeah.
going to be, and
Yeah.
that's not what it was at
No.
all.
And it'll just reinforce and confirm your biases to keep you in
Right.
the organization.
You're like, okay, so then that proves my point, of course.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like that. So that was, I think, the biggest surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And then that opened the door
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Yeah.
I think it helped me. I was like, okay, well, if that wasn't what I was told,
Mm-hmm.
because I was already not finding, things weren't adding up already.
Yeah.
So then, I now step outside, and my first thing that I look at
Mm-hmm.
wasn't what I thought it was going to be, what
Yeah.
kind of it had been made out to look like for me.
Yeah.
So then that allowed me, like I said, to open the door. It allowed me to start researching, and I went and looked at JW Facts,
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciated that because basically they pretty much copy and paste from the witness literature
Okay.
and show times of how it has changed over the years
Okay.
and how it just reinforced what I was finding, the holes that I was finding.
Okay. Right. And so things were probably starting to click.
Mm-hmm.
So you went from seeing a video of an ex-Jehovah's Witness to being on the jwfacts.com or .org,
Mm-hmm.
and you said, okay, like light bulbs.
Yes.
Okay.
So light bulbs are starting to go off. And I was like, okay, things are not what I had been made to think that they were.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it was starting to be the other way around.
Mm.
That the information I had been told wasn't entirely accurate.
Yeah.
And which then made me really start to think. It allowed for more independent thinking
Yeah.
and seeing and kind of opening my eyes and starting to think for myself and reason for myself.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you say it was more the opposite. There was a flip of the script, that things that you believed were true, in fact, weren't true.
Mm-hmm. Which can be a very emotionally
Yeah.
overwhelming thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because when, for myself, when you're going from a one way of thinking, a one way of believing things, and your life is made up and surrounded by this,
Mm-hmm.
to now starting to see the house of cards start to fall.
I was just thinking of that analogy. Yeah.
That you are now, they start slowly falling, and the further you dig, they start to fall.
The faster they fall.
The faster they start falling. And then that can become super overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because now you're like, this is all I've known.
Yeah.
I have created my entire identity
Yeah.
on all of this information. And now what?
Now-
Who do I believe?
Yeah, and it's
You
confronting.
question everything,
Yeah.
everyone, everything,
yes.
because you're like, you start to question yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're like,
Right.
I can't. It's just that. That is
Yes.
how it was for me, at
Yeah.
least. It
Like
was
this does not compute.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And so your life is just all not what you thought it was going to be. So you start to have to rebuild that trust.
Yeah, with yourself.
With yourself, that you can trust what you're being told.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine how that would confront you in every area of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that goes into really then, when you are getting shunned and people are leaving your life, it's losing trust in a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Not only the organization that you dedicated your life to and that you grew up in, and that was your whole, way of thinking. Yes. All of it's gone.
Yeah. So by starting this journey, it sounds like when you started looking at the information more closely, that was kind of the gateway into leaving.
Oh, that was my gateway into leaving.
Yeah, it wasn't a person.
No, and a lot of witnesses want to blame people that leave, that they were stumbled out of the organization, that someone has stumbled them out. And I'm sure that's what some people think of myself. But it wasn't a person that upset me. It wasn't any big scandal from the standpoint of like with myself. It just, I just started questioning the material and the researching it, allowing myself to research it. And that's a big deal.
Right.
Because then you're like, well, I feel bad, I'm doing something wrong, then I'll get in trouble. It goes back a lot of getting in trouble.
Right.
And feeling guilty.
Which we learn as children, the feeling of I don't want to get in trouble, there are going to be consequences.
Right.
So so looking at your life now, how do you see, or how do you experience embracing information and taking it in, and is it like a freeing thing? Do you enjoy reading articles at your leisure? Like, how do you?
Yes, I enjoy being able to take in whatever information I choose to take in.
Yeah.
And researching it and learning not to take things at face value. And actually researching it, and then that allows me to know what I believe. And but yeah, I enjoy now. I don't have to think, okay, would this fall in the line of questionable material? It's like so I really enjoy. I read a lot more.
Yeah. Anything good?
Probably, yeah. No, but it's just, it's great to be able just to, I think everything goes back to deciding for yourself.
Yeah.
Having the control over your own life, and it not being constantly dictated to you.
Yeah.
And if you go outside of that parameter, you're doing something bad.
Yeah. And having this, now you have a freedom of information.
Yes.
And it's interesting because we're also in an information age. So there's information all over the place. So to the fact that these leaders believe they can control that, it's really very telling.
Yeah, it is, because when they when they threaten that if you are asking any of these questions, if you are questioning anything, if you do research anything and someone finds out, it circles back around to now your privileges come into question. Now you have the risk of being disfellowshipped.
There's a constant threat of punishment.
There is.
Yeah.
If you do anything outside of their boundaries or their parameters, there's that threat of punishment, and there's so it keeps you from doing it.
Right.
It did me.
The fear.
It did.
And it's also a fear of the unknown.
Right.
What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my family?
Right.
Right. So it kind of comes back to that from our last video, the behavior control through punishment and reward.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that, my husband at the time was bringing up at the very beginning was talking about the child abuse that was going on in Australia. And this is part of the information control. I completely dismissed it. I did not go and look it up myself, to even prove to myself that he was wrong.
Yeah.
Because
you just close it up.
I just close it up. I don't think about it anymore, even though really you do think about it. It's back in the back of your head, just kind of running low key.
Until eventually.
And then something will bring to a crossroads with that. And then you start looking it up and you're like, wait a minute. But it was, those were ways that I would shut down that whole, even questioning anything. I would immediately just shut it down.
It's similar to the rationalization you had to make to even conduct independent research.
Right.
Just, this is okay.
Right.
And this is okay. And
because I encourage them. I'm like, I would research where that actually says you can't talk to your kids.
You said that.
Yes. Yeah. I would encourage you to do that research, Dad.
So,
which I know it happened,
but from having lived through what doing research has done for you, you can now look back to people, organization, and encourage them to do your own research.
Right, and that goes to the point of another point of information control. You're not allowed to talk or be around ex-Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right, because now you have different information and a different perspective.
Right.
That would influence the members.
Right. So, that was kind of why I was asking, why can't you do both?
Yeah. And now what is it like? Do you find yourself like shutting things down sometimes, or open, or like how has that had to have shifted majorly?
Oh, yeah, it definitely did. Now I'm usually, if anything sounds any off the wall, I'm like, I'm going to look that up and research that.
Yeah.
I don't always believe things for face value, like I said at the, start, but I do my research more. I don't blindly just believe things anymore.
Yeah.
So that has changed. I don't think I probably will ever go back to that type of way of thinking.
Do you in what way do you research political type things, or how?
Political, spiritual, anything that anyone says that are referring back to something, I will, it's kind of like, what's the term, like when it's like clickbait?
Oh, right. Or bait and switch.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, wait a minute, that sounds very clickbaity.
Yeah.
Am I going to just believe it just because they said it?
Right. Yeah.
They said it to be true. Yeah.
And maybe the way they said it sounds really convincing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people definitely can say things a certain way that can really, plan on being convincible.
Right.
But now I research that. I go research couple of different articles from different sources,
Mm-hmm.
and
make your own conclusions.
and then make my own conclusion. And it may not be the same as what I,
Mm-hmm.
not mainstream maybe,
Yeah.
or but be able to create my own conclusions
Right.
of the research I've done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So now you have more like a fair and balanced approach
Yes.
to making decisions, taking information in, and deciding for yourself.
Yeah. And that's a great thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
Who would ever thought that I wasn't able to do that before?
Yeah.
It's absurd to think that.
Yeah. It's a different life.
It is. It is. So.
All right. Well, I feel like we've covered the eye pretty well without getting into the weeds of
Right.
it. So.